Councilman Jenkins, recording has begun.
Thank you for attending tonight. First, we'll do a roll call of members present.
Mayor James is absent. Councilman Winkler,
Present.
Councilman Trotlinger,
Present.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward,
Present.
Councilman Jenkins.
Present.
Councilman, you
Thank
have
you.
a quorum.
Thank you. So if I could ask everybody to stand, we'll do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Thank you. We'll move forward then with the approval of the meeting agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? Are there any suggested edits or changes to the agenda as presented?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you. There's a motion been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No, the agenda is accepted and will move forward as accepted and approved. Let's now move to our approval of the minutes. You should have received minutes for our February 25th, 2025 meeting, special meeting, closed session, and regular meeting. I believe those are attached. Are there any, well, let me make is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented, or are there any changes or amendments to be made?
Mayor Pro Temp, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
A motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, the meeting minutes weren't in my package that I printed out. Are they in yours?
I believe it's this item here.
That's the special.
That special meeting, right.
But the regular meeting minutes I don't see.
They may have been forwarded to us, I believe, prior to this.
Michelle. They don't, yes, I don't see the regular meeting minutes.
So that's the case, then we can defer that and approve this at the next meeting.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
So I need to make, we had to amend the motion then to reflect that. To her motion.
Mayor Pro Tem, I make a motion that we accept the closed session and special meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
second.
I hear a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I hear none. It's passed, so we have approval of this special meeting minutes. Now we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the public petitions, communications, appearances, and public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who has signed up and would like to speak to the council? I don't see any. Do we have any signups? I don't believe we do, but I'll verify that. And while we're checking on that, we have no sign up in person. Are there any folks online or virtually who wish to speak for 3 minutes? I don't believe I see any, so thank you. And so we'll move on to the next agenda item. Matters of council discussion. The first item is direct services proposal of the Wood Valley Community Strategies, and I believe this is being brought back.
Thank you. At the February 25th meeting, we presented this and the council had the discussion and they asked that we find out if there was a no compete clause. And we did through Mead and Hunt, which is attached.
Mr. Mayor, yes, but it still states does not pose a conflict of interest. It's not the same thing.
Well,
A
the last
non-compete
line
says,
will continue to do so where it does not pose a conflict of interest. Is that,
so we're asking for a non-compete. Does that violate a non-compete?
I think, I think, my concern, of course, was what was Meat and Hunt's position
Mhm.
on this. I think while it doesn't directly address our
Mhm.
concerns as stated, they are blessing his continued work with the town apart from Meat and Hunt specifically. My concerns are allayed because it is coming from a corporate representative. It's on their letterhead and it addresses it, although it's not direct.
Okay.
I'm okay with this representation at this time, rather than just taking Mr. Kendrick's word for it, which is what we were doing prior
Sure.
to
Yep.
today.
Okay.
okay. So do we have a consensus to move this forward to legislation at the end of the meeting?
We have a consensus? Councilman Whitler,
Yes.
Councilman Trolinger,
Yes.
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So we'll see this later on the agenda as part of
Yes, sir.
adoption. Thank you for the comments. So now we'll move on to the next item, which is the auditor's presentation by Treasurer Larson and our guest. Come forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, good evening. I'm Dan Kenny, partner with Mitchell and Titus, here to present the June 30, 24 audit for the town of La Plata. In your presentation, we're going to go through this document, and I believe we're going to put it on the screen for everyone. If we go to the table of contents on page 3, these are the areas that we're going to talk about. And then on page 4, we're going to go ahead and start with the audit highlights. And it indicates that we've expressed opinions on the 4 different areas: the governmental activities, the business activities, each major fund, and then the aggregate information as well. And you have received unmodified opinions on those 4 areas, and the fact that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And the audit was done in accordance with 2 standards: generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards as well. With that, we issued a internal control report, and in the internal control report, it did not indicate any significant deficiencies or any material weaknesses. Okay. And also, there were no unrecorded or recorded adjusting journal entries that were made. And on the non-attest service, we prepared the financial statements, but management assumed the responsibility for those numbers. Okay, moving on to page 5. This is where it talks about our audit approach and what we have to do with respect to all the different areas in terms of planning. We go through the risk assessment because, once again, I mentioned how we do it on the 4 different opinions. So we actually have to go through 4 different risk assessments on all those areas. And if you go to page 6, this is our team. Page 7, this is where we talk about each of the financial statement account or the area of emphasis. Talks about revenue recognition, cash and investments, and receivables. And in those 3 areas, there were no issues that were identified. Cash and investments, of course, we confirm all those. Receivables will do the same. For those that we don't get confirmations back, we look at subsequent collections to make sure it's a valid receivable as of year end. We go to page 8. This is where it talks about some of the other areas: capital assets and depreciation, the accounts payable, accrued wages, and long-term liabilities. Once again, no exceptions noted in those particular areas. Page 9, this is where it talks about the pension liabilities and net position fund balance. Once again, no exceptions were noted there. And of course, within your financial statements, you have all that information on the pension, which I know is voluminous, but it is required disclosure. And if you go to page 10, this is the required communication, and it goes a few pages. And in our plan, scope, and timing of the audit, this is where we talk about how we conducted our audit. We have complied with all the ethic requirements regarding independence. In your significant accounting policies, that's noted in note 1, you didn't have any changes in your significant accounting policy. On page 11, this is a continuation of your significant accounting policies, and it talks about the estimates. Other than the pension obligation, there were no significant estimates. Your disclosures were in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And we are pleased to report we did not identify any actual or suspected instances of fraud.
So question,
Yes.
can we go back to page 17, the top? Other than the pension obligation, no significant accounting estimates were identified.
Correct.
Does that mean that you found accounting estimates with the pension obligation?
Yeah. So of course, with the actuarial, there's assumptions used in there, and those are these significant estimates.
Okay.
Yep. And those disclosures are in there, and they also have in the required supplementary information, which is noted in the independent auditor's report. It talks about that information with respect to the pension. And that is your significant estimate. You have some very small estimates, not significant, but depreciation, that's where you have to estimate the useful life of a certain asset, 5 years, 7 years, or if it's longer, 25 years. Accounts receivable and allowance, whether or not you feel as if you're going to get that receivable back. So that's an estimate, but once again, not significant. So it wasn't mentioned. Okay, moving on. Page 12. There were no significant difficulties encountered during the audit. I talked about there were no uncorrected or corrected misstatements. No unusual transactions during the year. But you did have, of course, the bond and the funding agreements. You had that issuance, that was a significant transaction, and that information was disclosed in the financial statements. It was confirmed, and you could see all that information with respect to that new financing. Do you have a
Real quick, just for clarification,
Sure.
that's the High Grove or Pine Grove Special Taxing District. Is that what that is?
Yep. Yes.
Because I'm saying it because I'm not sure that everybody really,
Yeah.
particularly the public,
yeah. So
doesn't know what that is.
within your financial statements, you issued a bond for the special taxing district, and the proceeds from that funds future infrastructure, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, page 13, there were no disagreements with management. We have received representations from management. There were no consultations with other accountants, and there were no other significant matters, findings, or issues. Page 14, there were no instances of non-compliance with laws or regulations. And the other information and documents that's included in the independent auditor's report. And the last item, management noted no events or conditions that would indicate substantial doubt on the entity's ability to continue as a going concern. Okay, that concludes my presentation. So in summary, you received unmodified opinions on the 4 different areas, and in your internal control report, you didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that were noted. I'd like to thank management and all their effort for completing the audit, and happy to answer any questions.
Council, well, thank you for the presentation. The council have questions? I have some, but I would defer to the other council members first.
I had 2 questions, but Councilman Bryant Ward answered one of my original. As opposed to the pension obligation, as part of your audit duties, did you see anything that raised either questions or did you just verify the validity that we have a pension obligation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what we do is we go through the actuarial report, and with respect to that, there's another firm that externally, it actually gives a report on that particular information. So we have to note any change in the assumptions. And within your financial statements, there is a footnote that talks about the sensitivity of the disclosure. So if the discount rate goes up or down,
Mhm.
you can see that the swing, which is significant in terms of that obligation. But I always caution people, you don't have to pay it right away. So once again, it's an estimate, it's a future thing, but you know, they want folks to know that if that rate changes, here's what the number's going to look like.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I have I guess, a two-part question, and I don't know whether this was part of the engagement contract for your services, but I was curious. So does your audit look at trends, past trends from past audits? Like, we have audit statements that go back to 2009. And so is that part of your review, is to look at past trends? Because obviously an audit is a snapshot, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
1 year. I'm just curious whether there's a look back as to the trends of those audits and different
Yeah,
ratios.
that's a great question. So what we do is we're opining for the as of the year end and then for the year end ended, right? So it's your 12 months of quote unquote, I'm going to use the word P&L, right? And then your snapshot, if you will, for all your balance sheet items. So it's just that particular period. However, you know, in your preliminary analytical review procedures and your final analytical review procedures, we're not just taking what's the change in the balance, okay? Because there could be something that didn't change that should have changed. So let's say, you know, expenditures in the general fund regarding salaries. Let's say the variance between last year and this year was, you know, very small, right? That wouldn't pop out on the auditor. Oh man, that balance didn't change by that much. I'm not worried about it. However, if you've budgeted a significant increase or a significant reduction, the auditor, you know, what we're supposed to do is sort of anticipate a trend as to, you know, sort of a predictive nature of it, like what should it be? So that answers part of it. Now, what we don't do is we don't go back 10 years, right?
Okay.
You know, we're not going to go back 10 years because we're giving the opinion on those 4 areas for that particular period. But we do consider, you know, a lot of things that you have done over the years. And of course, we're looking at things because, you know, we started 2 years ago, so we had to get comfortable with beginning balances too. So that's a good question. So you have to make sure that the beginning balances that are carried forward, that those numbers,
Right.
you know, you're comfortable with those particular numbers because you haven't audited those numbers yet.
And then just to thank you for that
Sure.
clarification. And then in the actual report, not the summary, I think
Yep.
there's a statement, I'm going to paraphrase, that La Plata is in a strong financial position. Is that?
No, that's not in the report.
Oh.
That's not in our report. We don't say that. However, that being said, one thing that I teach a class with the Maryland GFOA, and we talk
Okay.
about fund balance and unassigned fund balance and what should the number be and what's a best practice. So GFOA talks about best practice of having, you know, 2 to 3 months minimum of an unassigned fund balance number. So if you look at yours, you have general fund last year expenditures of, we'll just say $30 million, right? Divided by 12. And then you look at your unassigned of 11.5. So, you know, I can't write in the report, this looks good or whatever, but I think it's greater than the 2 to 3 months. That is the minimum required that the GFOA would recommend.
And then I'll probably ask the treasurer later on, is it good practice for the town to look at those trends, audit trends over the last number of years?
Sure it is. It helps with budgeting.
Right.
You know,
That's-
you want to look at what you've spent your dollars on. What are the outcomes? It's more like what services are you providing? You know, have you hit your marks that you as elected officials want to, you know, convey to the public? So it's all those things that you have to consider, and you do that in your budget as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? And I would just, again, thank you for your services and your work. I'm sure it takes a while to do this. And then I would just advise that the actual report is on the town's website and you can go back and look at it. It's there because I've looked at it. I'm a nerd, so I look at it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So with that, thank you. We'll move forward to the next agenda item. Treasurer Larson is going to give us general fund overview. And again, that should be in your package as well.
Evening, council. So I did a financial statement overview. This is an overview of the financial statements that, like you said, is on our website. In the general funds, our net position, it decreased just over 7 million. That's due to the long-term liability for the bonds that were issued and the net of the decrease in the short-term liabilities for the ARPA funds that we used. Our fund balance did increase 6.6 million. However, with that, 6.1 million is an assigned fund balance. One is for the ARPA projects and the other one is the Heritage Green special taxing. They did a escrow payment and that's what's in there. Part of that was because, or interest, we received 1.45 million in interest, and that is part of the reason why we have an increase in the unassigned fund balance. I'm sorry. The next slide. Revenues and expenses. So our revenues were 36 million, expenses were 29 million. As stated, that's pretty much due to the ARPA funds that we utilized and the bonds. Expenditures, those were increased by the 29 million. 13 million is for the infrastructure for the roads in Pine Grove. So basically the bond supported that expense. Revenues, the revenue details. Again, most of it is the ARPA, the bonds. You can see that there's a change in services that increased significantly over the last 2 years, and that's mainly for the new development, the inspections. On the expense side, the increase in general government is because of the land purchase, the increase in parks and recreations for the trail design, and of course, the debt is Heritage Green. Budget versus actual. Some of the differences like the taxes, income taxes were 21% higher than expected. ARPA was the intergovernment, inspections were the service charges. Miscellaneous is because of the investment revenues. The rate of return was higher than expected. In expenses, general government, the variance is due to unfilled positions. Planning had an unfilled positions. Finance was half, 2 positions were only filled half year. In public safety, there was a variance due to capital outlay. The license plate readers were never purchased. And the same thing in public works, it was due to capital outlay, which was the upgrades to the public works building. You can see more detail of these by salary, personnel, operating capital between pages 60 and 62 of the financials. Capital assets, there was purchase of the land, there was the 8 vehicles for PD, and there was an allocation of a truck for public works. And then we eliminated some obsolete software like Intergov and Time Clock that we no longer use. And then there was 1 vehicle that was totaled, so that's no longer there. The long-term debt, again, that's for the Pine Grove liability. And again, if you can go see on pages 41 and 42 regarding that, more detail on that. So the overall net position in the enterprise funds increased 11.7 million. Again, that's because of the major facility fees collected on the new development and the infrastructure that's construction progress. The fund balances, the main increase was of course sewer and water, a major increase into the major facility fees, or the major facility fund. So revenues and expenses for water and sewer, again, major facility fees, small change in the debt. So of course, most of the revenue is from user fees, but that also includes the major facility fees, 84%. And then operating, contracted services, materials, that's makes up the most of the expense category. On water and sewer, again, you can see our intergovernmental has increased year over year. That's again for the pump stations, ARPA funds used for the pump station. And like with the general fund, interest is supporting our operations. You can see the interest increasing significantly the last 2 years compared to the previous 3 years. Same, nothing really significant with sanitation. And stormwater, again, the intergovernmental, that is due to the ARPA funds being used to fund the upgrades for the MS4 requirements. That's it. Oh, yeah. And then the capital assets. There's the construction in progress of the Mod 1 and Southwest Quadrant, which were near completion at the beginning of FY 25. So that will be capitalized in this year. And that is it.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members? Councilman Winkler?
Just to make you aware, I talked with Ms. Larson earlier today to answer as we discussed earlier, the pension liability, you saw no issues long-term as it's currently, if I remember correctly from our conversation earlier.
That's the Maryland State Retirement. Yeah.
Correct. So, and there's nothing from a pension obligation there, only because we're getting ready to talk about it, and I just want to make that clear. Something that I know Councilman Jenkins has brought up in the past, when you're looking at long-term projections for when they deed the roads over, is that factored into what long-term maintenance costs as part of your capital, when you move it over from a project over to the capital overlay or
Well,
outlay?
so that is one thing that we're working on, is getting a better idea of our assets and being able to predict how long. So we are working on a long-term plan. So yes, it would be something we would consider
Okay.
when we anticipate that to be signed over, or dedicated to the town, when we're responsible for it.
So, okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. And I'll try to refer to the right page if I get it right. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot
And
to
the
write
very-
down the page numbers on.
Pardon me?
I forgot to write down your page numbers on here.
Yeah, page 30 of 49, the net position, it was reduced. So was that I mean, is that a bad sign? Is that an indicator of the future? I mean, I'm just curious.
No, not necessarily. It's because we have that debt. So you got to look
Okay.
at our assets and our liabilities. And because our liabilities increased, your net position is going to
Okay.
decrease.
All right. So you don't see that as any alarm
Well,
bell?
no, because the debt is being paid by special taxes collected in the Pine Grove. So no.
Mhm. And then with respect to ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan, so that's going to, we have to spend them by the end of this calendar year.
No, we've already spent it.
So
What
that's
I've
even
done-
better news. Okay.
So what I've done is, because we've reallocated the budget to cover
Okay.
salaries and benefits so that we
Mhm.
made sure we met the deadline, those original projects are set into a reserve to be those funds are to be used for that. And that's why there's a new assigned fund balance, which was for those projects. And that was 4.7 million.
Okay. And then there's, I understand now because you explained it, the bonds. So what is the debt service that we have?
Well, that's the bond.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, sometimes they're used interchangeably, and I just want to be clear
Mhm.
that I
No,
understand.
the bonds are the
difference.
debt.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then this is probably a question we'll get into next week when we get our first shot at the draft budget, but will there be I assume there'll be some impact when ARPA runs out? We don't have it anymore as a revenue source, so that's going to
That's
be an
addressed
impact.
in the budget,
Yeah.
my summary of the budget. When I provide the budget,
Okay,
you'll see that we have some that we can use in this year, but most of those ARPA funds are for capital, not for
Right.
operating.
so the one-time
Yeah.
cost, right?
And again, you're going to get the operating budget, the capital budget will come later because we've separated the
Right.
two.
Right. And then, given the recent volatility in the federal government budgeting and now the state budget, does La Plata face any particular exposure to loans or grants that would affect our upcoming and future budgets? We can talk about it later, but I just want to put that out there.
Operating wise, we don't rely on it, but there could be other effects, like it could decrease our income tax if
Right.
those people affect, and it's hard to say how much. As far as on the grant side on capital, we do have some that are still being reviewed by the state. And if they don't have the funding, we may not get it. The applications, all 5 have been submitted. We've received one, signed the contract. The other one goes up for review on the 19th, and the other 3 are pending.
So this will not affect, hopefully, the radio station road pathway?
Well, that's not.
That's a state grant, I know.
That's different. I'm talking about the Dorchester Community Center
Right.
and the police station.
Okay, we can talk about that one later, but not for tonight. Okay, I don't have any other questions. I do appreciate the presentation. I found that for me anyway, it's very clear and concise. So appreciate that. Any other questions from?
Just follow up, Director, when should we expect the draft of the budgets to review?
Tomorrow morning.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you again. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a presentation by, I'm going to butcher this name, AMRET presentation with respect to the proposed or suggested pension plan.
All right.
Director Kennedy.
Yes, thank you. Today with us on the call, it looks like we have 2 representatives with us. The first is Paul. He is the Executive Vice President at AMRET, and he's the one that I've been doing most of my communication with to let him know what we're looking to do and our plans. And so he's been helpful to come together, and he'll talk more about their views on this pension. And then also on the call with us today is Ed Emerson, who is a partner at Morris, Manning and Martin, who is their partner legal firm that they work with, who addresses the legal and the compliance side of creating and maintaining a pension over a period of time. So with that, I will let Paul and Ed take it away. Maybe. They have, maybe if they're on mute, but they did provide, with your attachments, you should see that they have broken down their estimates of startup costs and estimated costs from a legal admin investment angle, and also their ongoing activity costs for the same categories and what our town's liabilities will be over time. So they are here to answer any additional questions that you have for them at this time.
I mean, are they
Are they going to make any?
presentation?
No, because the council had just asked if they would come and answer questions. There wasn't a request for a formal presentation.
Thought that's what we did ask for.
I think that was part of why we
Wanted-
hadn't heard from them from about 2 months as you were scheduling them to present, like our last,
But
last-
USI chose to do a presentation.
okay, so this group chose to give us a 1-page summary for question and answers. Okay, well, could we hear from are they on mute or are they?
Mr. Emerson, is your microphone working?
Hey, this is Ed Emerson. I'm not sure if Paul Troop's here or not. Um, I'm not sure exactly, what was provided to you all. I did provide an estimate for my services to Paul's group, for creating a plan document, doing IRS determination letter, reviewing all vendor agreements, reviewing and negotiating a trust agreement for this new pension plan, reviewing and providing input on an investment policy statement, which I assume that AMRET would be advising on the advisory front, preparing any investment committee delegation and bylaws. And then just ongoing legal services as needed by the committee, training, or any legal issues that came up with the inception of the wraparound pension plan.
Okay, I'll ask some questions.
Go ahead.
Mr. Emerson, this is Matt Trollinger, Councilman for Ward 2. Can I ask you what the scope of the request was from the town to you as far as your presentation to us today of this summary?
Um,
I mean, I
I was
see it in
asked,
numerical presentation, but what's the data that you were given? What were you asked to supply us today?
I was told that that you all wanted to do from a study that was a Botten report study, wanted to do what I believe is Plan 3 of a sort of a supplemental pension enhancement plan. That's what I was given a presentation of. Most of this communications though has been through AMRET and Mr. Paul Troop. So, I'm supporting him. This is, what I was given from him, and I believe it was provided to him by the city.
Okay, so walking through it, just kind of piece by piece from what Mr. Troop has supplied you. Legal, you have listed for $100,000 to create a plan document and an IRS determination letter. Is this to create the entirety of the plan itself?
So what I provided them was a list of services. And it's the range I gave was 40 to 60,000 to create a plan document, do an IRS determination letter, review and negotiate any vendor agreements necessary to implement this new plan, record keeper, consultant, actuary, review and negotiate a trust agreement for the plan or custodial agreement as needed. I would assume that the plan would have an investment policy statement, so I would be reviewing that. Preparing a committee delegation from the city to establish an investment committee to oversee the investments of the plan, set up the bylaws and committee charter. And then it was ongoing kind of legal issues, and which would attend any committee meetings as necessary, provide fiduciary training to this investment committee, and to handle any kind of legal issues that would come up or arise from time to time. That was the proposal as revised, that I sent AMRET.
Okay, so the 40 to 60 is one allocation. I mean, we're given 100 on this,
100,000.
100 on this sheet. You can see that, right? I mean,
I'm looking at the information I provided AMRET. So,
okay.
But so it would not be 100 from my end. My legal estimate was depending on, you know, how much negotiation would happen. I gave a range of 40 to 60 to them. I don't know if they aggregated those numbers, or, you know, maybe that's what happened and what they provided.
Okay.
I see Paul Troops on the line here. I don't know.
Yeah, I see his name.
Yeah.
I don't
But
see his.
yeah, I can, I don't know if I could share what I provided, but.
Oh, we have it. We have it.
Okay.
Well, we
No.
don't have what you
You
provided.
provided.
I apologize. We have what was provided to us.
Right.
But I did want to ask you, there's an initial investment listed for $20,000, and it's underneath, it's allocated to engage West Banco as a custodial bank and establish an investment program. Can you, what are you think
I-
that's,
You said the initial funding is 200,000.
I see, but above it, it says investment
Oh,
20,000.
okay.
So could you tell us a little bit about that section there?
This was something provided by AMRET here. I assume that that's the engagement of the custodian for this new plan, and to establish, you know, the investment pieces that they would be putting together on this. I assume that that's their investment program or policy that they're suggesting with establishing, you know, this plan. This is their fees. And
Okay.
I'm just guessing because
No, and I don't want to grill you
And-
if you don't have the information. Is there anything on this one-page summary sheet that you can give us some guidance on that you contributed to that can help us understand potential costs here that you may have provided to AMRET?
I took this sheet and I revised it to them and added, you know, four bullet. I changed the fee range to 40 to 60 up here at where it says legal 100,000.
Okay.
And I provided them create plan document, IRS determination letter, review and negotiate those vendor agreements as 3, review and negotiate trust or custodial agreements, number 4, reviewing the investment policy statement, number 5, prepare the committee delegation, the charter and bylaws is number 6. Down below, kind of ongoing would be, this would be in, you know, like generally over a year, potentially, you know, outside of startup costs, like after, let's say, a year, the plan's been in process, it would, you know, deal with any legal issues, kind of attend any committee meetings as necessary. And this would assume monthly meetings on my end, committee training as necessary, review domestic relations orders, and handle any plan issues that would arise from time to time. And it was just an estimate of what I would consider, you know, kind of the norm that I see with city plans involved in maintaining and administering a pension program.
Okay. Do you think that you could supplement to us what you provided to AMRET as we look over this document? You know, provide that to Ms. Minor.
Yes, I can send it. I can email it right now, what I had.
We're not going to go over it right now, but it's helpful to
Yeah.
know since Mr. Troop is not, I guess, available
And the numbers don't match.
and the numbers don't match, right? Ms. Kennedy, did we pay for this?
No, so back in November, the conversation was when I was trying to explain the costs. It was made clear that you did not believe what I was saying and you would ask to speak and hear it directly from them. And so the question, and I went back and reviewed, was that you would like to talk to these vendors directly so that you could ask questions and hear it directly from them. That is what I had the first organization do, and then that's what I brought Amrit in for today, so that you could ask direct questions to hear the same numbers from them that I was trying to provide in November.
Do you think we've accomplished something helpful tonight in comparison to the last discussion?
As a matter of fact, I think the data that you've gotten from USI and Amrit have actually increased cost from what we had talked about in November.
I mean, I don't know. We've got two different numbers from the same vendor tonight. I know you stated to me you were personally offended as to my inquiry as to what we were actually asking these vendors. And I think my concern was you stated that we had contacted all of these companies and only two had responded
That is correct.
with the ability to create a plan.
That were willing to engage with us to do the plan.
Right.
Mhm.
But you were frustrated about my request to find out what we were actually asking for these vendors to do.
Right, and both vendors confirmed that they received the Bolton reports.
Well,
And then that's how they came up with the information provided.
we have a vendor tonight saying they received a Botten report. We've got,
Bolton.
I know what it's called. I heard what he said, and we've got a very stark variation between the first item on the list here of legal. It's significantly higher on what was presented to council versus what the vendors communicated with themselves. And so again, I don't think we're building credibility and reporting here, but we've got a one-page document that's inherently inconsistent on a pivotal decision that's going to affect the town and its employees for potentially decades or more. And I don't understand why we cannot come up with costs that are accurate. And I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Well, until we actually sign a contract with one of these two vendors, we will not have 100% accurate costs.
I mean, we don't have an accurate cost onto an estimate.
Right,
of
but we
legal.
don't, right, but also with Paul not able to communicate, we don't know that there's no way for me to know that he didn't have some other number rolled into that first line. So I don't know that it's 100% from just from Ed's team, that there might be something else that Amrit has also included in that, because Amrit is a consulting company different from the legal team. And they may have their own costs under consideration in that number as well.
Understood. Were you were the one communicating with Amrit?
Correct.
Okay, but you don't have an idea what they're talking about on this, the legal being 100 versus 40 or 60.
He didn't tell me exactly where he got his data and put it together for. He provided me a summary of everything that his team had.
Do you have anything else beyond this one-page document from Amrit?
In November, I provided several documents that came from Amrit and from Morris, Manning and Martin
Okay,
that had additional costs on them. That was also provided, in our November meeting.
okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you so much for your help.
Go ahead. If I may, it's Mr. Emerson, correct?
That's right.
So, Mr. Emerson, this is David Winkler, I'm Ward 1 Councilman. You are simply looking at it from the legal aspect, correct? Not the investment advisory aspect?
That's correct.
Okay. So just in that context, do you see any legal constraints to implementing this plan? Whether it's with the actual setup of the plan or with dealing with the IRS, have you seen something similar to this in your experience?
Yes, I mean, I represent probably about 30 different governmental entities. Most of mine are in Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. We set up these plans regularly. The IRS is, they may take some time, but generally approval's pretty easy on what we do. I mean, we've done enough of these qualified pension plans and these, I call it a supplemental plan here, to, come in from an efficient point of view and get approval from the IRS. The IRS is a little bit slow in getting the approvals, but you do not have to wait for the approval necessarily to start this plan from the IRS. And they've been taking about 12 to 16 months to approve qualified plans this nature on an initial determination letter application.
Okay, so from a legal perspective, you don't see any issues with how the plan is set up or how it's currently written, that presents any challenges to you from, like I said, from a legal, not from a financial side, but from the legal side.
Nothing from the legal side.
Okay. The rest of my questions have to deal with from the financial, but if we can't get to Paul, then it's kind of frustrating.
Any other questions or comments? I have a bunch of stuff, but I'm not sure we could be here a while. So you indicated there was material sent in November.
That is correct.
I guess I'm just confused why wasn't this included with this, but I can't fix that tonight. So nobody can answer the question that at the bottom of the page, it says additional annual funding, $200,000 times CPI.
That's the consumer price
I,
index.
but I guess I don't understand what that means in the context of a plan. I don't. So, and I'm
It's-
sure nobody
it's
can
indicating
answer
that the cost is going to go up every year.
by $200,000.
Times the CPI, yeah.
Again, I just don't know what the source of that and frankly, the reliability of what that means.
Because the ongoing cost is going to include our contribution.
I don't doubt that, but what I'm trying to get to, it would be great, and we're not going to get it tonight, obviously, that we would have documentation that defines and provides factual data about these figures, but we're not going to get that tonight. So I would offer, at least as one council member, I'm going to try to recapture this material, and frankly, I'm going to forward some questions, and I'll send them to Ms. Minor if that's appropriate. Any other, go ahead. I think there's some other comments to be made here.
I agree. I have, like I said, I have about 8 or 10 questions from the financial, because I question the same thing, is the cost, but I don't know where these costs came from.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, their estimates, I get it. Are they pie in the sky, or are they plus or minus 5%?
Mhm.
That's the question I have, as to whether the plan is functionally, if it's, if it's viable or if it's sustainable. But I guess, I mean, can we submit them to Mr. Trope via Michelle or Monica via you, and just maybe he can answer them?
Right.
Okay.
I can answer anything.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I did want to thank you for clarifying that you did not see any legal issues as far as IRS approval. I know that in the past, it was discussed with council and staff that there was no plan like this in the country, and that it may have a significant challenge for IRS approval, but based on Councilman Winkler's questions to you, that doesn't appear to be the case. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, as the plan, as I understand it, I don't see any legal challenges now. I've gotten my information generally from AMRET, so I'm just going based on the information I've received. I didn't see anything that would prevent me from thinking we would have a qualified plan and approved by the IRS.
Thank you.
Seeing no other particular comments at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here tonight and answering our questions. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is legislation. And I believe there's a resolution to be presented for review.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Jenkins. Legislation, Resolution 25-02, Professional Services Agreement, Wood Valley Community Strategies for Introduction and Consideration of Adoption. Resolution concerning Professional Services Agreement, Wood Valley Community Strategies for the purpose of authorizing the town manager to enter into a contract agreement for professional services for the management of various planning and capital projects in the town of La Plata and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you. Is there a motion to be made tonight on this resolution?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Jenkins, I'd like to make a motion to accept Resolution 2502, Professional Services Agreement for Wood Valley Community Strategies.
Is there a second?
Second it.
I hear a second. Any discussion? I would just offer a comment before we take the vote in that Mr. Kendrick has provided, I think we can reach a consensus that he's provided some valuable services to us over the last number of years, obtained some grants for us, including what I referred to earlier as the Radio Station Road Pathway. Hopefully that will be in place shortly. But anyway, I would, as one councilman, I would certainly express my support and appreciation for that effort he's done for us. And then he's also been instrumental in obtaining a federal grant. Hopefully it'll come to us, but at least that's happened. So with that, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? There are none. The resolution passes. So then we come to our final agenda item is new business. That is reports from the mayor, again, who's out of town at a conference, but also members of the council. Are there any reports to be provided tonight? Councilman Winkler?
Let me turn my, on a somewhat of a personal, I about a year ago, I did the same thing. I want to commend the La Plata High School wrestling team for once again sending the most participants, both boys and girls, to states than any school in the state of Maryland. And there's a reason why I bring it up is because on March 29th is the La Plata High School mulch sale. So we are lucky enough that we are still a small community, and the schools are reliant on the people within the community. So if you have the wherewithal, contact La Plata High School boosters for to deliver your mulch on March 29th. Aside from that, DRB meets tomorrow morning. I'll have a report at our next meeting.
Thank you. And that's a great service. So it's greatly appreciated. Councilman Trollinger?
Nothing to report tonight.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward? I have two items. First, the Parks and Recreation Commission is meeting tomorrow morning, as I always say, at dark 7:30, virtual meeting. And we're going to be have some discussion item on the Pine Grove amenity package. So that'll be a good discussion. I think it's been changed or upgraded, or we'll get an update on that amenity package as part of Pine Grove. And then finally, I would just add an observation, a comment. I had the chance to call me nerdy, but that's what it is. As you know, we have a finance committee that has started to work, and I had the opportunity to look at the videos of some of those meetings so far. My own observation would be got some pretty good folks on that committee that have a lot of good experience, and they are engaged. And I thought they had a particularly good discussion about and questions about the budget and the budget process, strategic planning. So I was very encouraged and heartened by that conversation. So I do appreciate it. So we do look forward to their recommendations. And I did have the opportunity to send some observations to one of the members who I know. So just so you know that. So with that, any other comments or reports? With that, I would thank everybody for, go ahead, Ms. Minor.
Can we remind everybody of the primary on Monday?
Yes, we can. Thank you. As you know, we have an upcoming election and the ordinance talks about, if we have two or more candidates in one ward, there's a primary. We do have a primary for Ward 2, and the vote, that primary day is Monday, the 17th. You can vote here in Town Hall, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. So I would urge everybody to exercise your right and vote, because we need everybody to vote. With that, I would adjourn the meeting. It's at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you for your attendance and your participation.